pressure changed him. Sales quotas doubled. Employees were told to sell premium repairs whether customers needed them or not. Anyone who questioned the policy received fewer commissions. Even longtime staff began leaving. Only Frank remained. Eli couldn't understand why. You could work anywhere. Frank tightened the last bolt on an engine. Maybe. So why stay? Frank looked around the old garage. Because promises aren't only kept when they're convenient. Across town, Mrs. Bennett met with her attorney once again. The elderly woman looked weaker than before. She opened another folder. Inside was a faded handwritten letter. The attorney smiled. I haven't seen this in years. It deserves to be read one last time. He unfolded it carefully. The handwriting belonged to Thomas Bennett, the founder of Riverside Motors. If anything ever happens to me, never judge this business by its profits. Judge it by whether people still trust a man fixing their cars. If that trust disappears, the dealership has already failed. The attorney looked up. He really believed that. Mrs. Bennett smiled sadly. He believed it because Frank taught him. Nearly 30 years earlier, Thomas Bennett had known the first thing about repairing engines. Frank had. Thomas sold cars. Frank fixed them. But when a dishonest supplier offered cheaper counterfeit parts with enormous profit margins, Thomas almost accepted. Frank stopped him. If we fool people once, they'll never believe us again. Thomas had walked away from the deal. That decision nearly bankrupted the company. For 2 difficult years they struggled. Then something remarkable happened. Customers began recommending Riverside everywhere. Trust rebuilt everything profit never could. From that day forward, Thomas often repeated one sentence. Integrity is expensive today, but priceless tomorrow. Back in the present, Victor never knew any of that history. To him, Frank was simply an old mechanic slowing modernization. The financial reports grew worse. Banks reduced Riverside's credit. Suppliers demanded faster payments. Victor borrowed more, then more, until there was nowhere left to borrow. One rainy afternoon, the foreclosure notice arrived. Victor stared at it for nearly an hour. His hands trembled. The dealership he'd been so proud to control would soon be auctioned. Word spread quickly. Employees whispered in the break room. Customers noticed empty parking spaces. Salespeople quietly searched for new jobs. Only Frank's routine never changed. Before sunrise, same lunchbox, same red towel, same careful work, as though stability itself could comfort everyone around him. One evening, Victor found Frank locking the garage. It's over. Frank looked at him. The bank's taking everything. Silence. Victor laughed bitterly. You probably think I deserve it. Frank answered softly. I think you're hurting. Victor looked away. I wanted people to respect this place. Frank nodded. You confuse respect with admiration. Victor frowned. They're different. Admiration is often about appearances. Frank closed the toolbox. Respect is earned after people see who you are when appearances disappear. Victor had no answer. For the first time, he wasn't speaking to an employee. He was listening to a teacher. Auction day arrived. Nearly everyone in town gathered. Former customers, employees, reporters, even people who had bought their first cars their decades earlier. The atmosphere felt like a funeral. Victor sat alone in the front row. Mrs. Bennett entered quietly with her attorney. Few recognized her. Frank stood near the back, beside Eli. He wore the same clean but faded coveralls, the same old work boots, the same folded red towel tucked inside his lunchbox. The auctioneer began. The property known as Riverside Motors. Bidding started. A national dealership chain offered first, then an investment group, then a property developer interested in demolishing the building. Each bid climbed higher. Victor lowered his head. He couldn't watch anymore. Then Mrs. Bennett slowly stood. I have one additional bidder. The room turned. The auctioneer looked confused. Registered through legal counsel. The attorney handed over sealed documents. The The auctioneer read them carefully. His eyebrows rose. He looked toward the back of the room. Frank Holloway. A wave of whispers swept across the crowd. The mechanic? No way. How? Even Eli stared. Frank looked just as surprised. He slowly turned toward Mrs. Bennett. She smiled through tears. It's time you stop keeping only one promise. The attorney addressed the room. 30 years ago, Thomas Bennett established a trust. Victor blinked. What trust? A trust that could only be activated if Riverside Motors faced permanent closure. The room became silent. It was never intended to make someone rich. It was created to protect the dealership's original purpose. Someone asked, "Who decides that?" Mrs. Bennett answered herself. "My husband did." She looked directly at Frank. He chose the one man he believed would always protect the customers before protecting himself. Frank's eyes filled with tears. "I told him never to do that." Mrs. Bennett smiled. "I know. You argued for 3 days." Soft laughter spread through the room. He said, "That was exactly why it had to be you." The attorney continued, "The trust does not transfer wealth to Mr. Holloway. It transfers responsibility. It requires him to preserve the dealership's values, protect honest repair practices, and continue serving this community." Frank stood frozen. "I never wanted ownership." Mrs. Bennett walked toward him. "No, you wanted integrity." She gently placed Thomas Bennett's old dealership keys into Frank's rough, grease-stained hands. "And that's exactly why you've earned both." Victor slowly approached. His voice barely worked. "I spent 3 years trying to make this place look successful." Frank nodded quietly. "You spent 30 years making people believe it was." Frank looked at him gently. "No, we did." Victor stared at him. After everything, Frank had included him, not because Victor deserved it, because grace sometimes teaches what punishment never can. Victor's shoulders collapsed. "I'm sorry. It wasn't polished. It wasn't strategic. It was the first completely honest sentence he'd spoken in years." Frank extended his hand, then helped me rebuild it. Victor looked stunned. "You still let me stay? You know sales. You just forgot who you were selling for." Tears filled Victor's eyes as he shook Frank's hand. 6 months later, the marble floors remained, but the first thing customers noticed wasn't the showroom. It was a simple wooden sign hanging above the service entrance. "Integrity is expensive today, but priceless tomorrow." Beneath it, framed behind glass, hung Frank's faded red shop towel. The embroidered initials were still barely visible. FH, no longer hidden by grease, no longer mistaken for an ordinary rag. It had become a symbol of every quiet promise that had built Riverside Motors. Customers often stopped to read the small plaque beneath it. This towel reminds us that trust is earned one honest repair at a time. Eli eventually became the service manager. Victor remained with the dealership, but his office door stayed open. Whenever a customer thanked him, he smiled and replied, "Don't thank me. Thank the mechanic who taught us what this business was really worth." And every morning before the doors opened, Frank still arrived before sunrise, not because he owned the dealership, but because ownership had never been his dream. Stewardship was. Because in the end, this story was never about a dirty mechanic buying a car dealership. It was about a man who spent decades proving that character outlasts appearances, that trust compounds more powerfully than profit, and that the hands people dismiss for being stained with honest work are often the very hands capable of building something that lasts. Life lesson: never mistake a person's appearance for their value. Integrity may not draw attention immediately, but over time it becomes a foundation that success cannot exist without. Discussion question: if you had to choose between earning quick profit or protecting someone's trust, which would you choose and why? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely love to hear what you think.